Does Bionic, the Brazilian movie on Netflix, give us a break that's useful from the usual Hollywood scripts? Stick around and I'll give you my thoughts anyway. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. The IMDb synopsis for Bionic reads, "When the progress of robotics makes Paralympic athletes the new sports stars, Maria dreams of competing against her sister. For that, she will have to enter a world of crime and violence." So as I said, this is a Brazilian with subtitles, but worth the trade-off, I think, in at least several respects. The trailer, I think, emphasizes the sci-fi bionic action, which the movie certainly does have, but much of the middle of this movie is about family drama and tensions, specifically sibling rivalry and feeling overlooked by your parents, like they're favoring the other sibling instead of you, or watching your sibling accomplish things that you would like to accomplish and feeling jealous about that. I wish that the movie had been just a little bit more purposed toward this end and left out some of the crime stuff that I think is a valuable part of the movie, but even so, it's like, I don't know. Because it took a while for me to invest in the family drama aspect. I'm honestly not sure how much of that is because I wasn't really expecting that much of an emphasis, how much of it was the language barrier. But even so, it took me longer than I would have liked to really get invested in the relationships, the dysfunction of them, and hoping for reconciliation, that kind of thing. Several action concepts I thought were not believable, mainly because they assumed too much of a bionic limb. Now, most of the bionic action, it's fine. I can totally go along with it. So this is not a complaint, generally speaking, about the concepts of the action. But, for example, the bionic limb might be strong enough to tip over a car, but if you only have a bionic right leg, then that's still going to require your left leg to be anchoring you in a way that it's just not going to be up for. What you need in that situation is at least two bionic legs, one to brace and one to actually do the pushing. And so the script kind of like asks too much of a single bionic limb now and then. There was one story reveal late in the movie that felt so obvious to me that I was confused that they were treating it like a reveal. So there was these elements of the script that were like, that's weird, that feels like non-believable, or it seems like it's way too obvious or whatever. However, right about the midpoint where I was like, I don't know, I'm seeing just one too many of these things. None of them were like super glaring. It was just starting to become a death by a thousand cuts scenario in terms of what I thought of the script, story, its believability and stuff. But somewhere around the midway point, there were several turns the story started taking that I didn't expect. And the last 45 minutes had me feeling, with one exception, almost completely blind about where things would go next. It just didn't follow Hollywood conventions where I would say to myself, okay, well, this happened and this character feels this way, so that means we're going to have this kind of moment in the story to play that out. They just weren't doing that. They weren't jumping those hoops, checking those boxes. They were doing something different. Now, maybe to a Brazilian audience, it would feel very predictable. I have no idea. But to me, I was like, I just so appreciated the feeling of not knowing where things might go. And while it took a while, I did eventually feel invested in that hope of reconciliation between these siblings. It also has a morally gray ending I'm not sure how I feel about. And I appreciate when a movie is okay with leaving me feeling that way. So the script, the story is a bit of like a mixed bag, but it has some things that made it worth my time. As far as the cast goes, these are complete unknowns to me as someone who doesn't really watch Brazilian movies, but all of them worked for me. And keeping the Brazilian audio on, which is an option on Netflix. You can watch an English dub. I didn't even listen to what it sounds like. I just did Brazilian with English subtitles, and that allowed the performances of the original actors to come through. And the inflection and cadence felt more similar, more relatable to me to English, American English, than say the Japanese of Godzilla Minus One that I reviewed last week. So it really didn't feel like as much of a barrier to the performances and connecting with the performances as some other movies that are not in English might be for me. So I felt like, they were solid performers and there was a lead with good emotional access. So really, no complaints. Since I don't speak Brazilian, I can't really say more than that because I can't appreciate the nuance, I'm sure, but I certainly don't have any complaints. Okay, stunts and visuals. I would describe the quality of the effects to be somewhere between, solid big budget TV, network television, not premium streaming, service type stuff that can really get movie like. But no, more like, big budget TV, somewhere between that and big budget Hollywood, with a few CG objects that looked more fake than others. But solid enough to convey the fantasy I wanted to experience of seeing bionic limbs in action and doing crazy actiony things, super strength things and super jumping things and stuff. That a lot of that, I mean, that was all really solid for me. And the limb replacement itself was among the most believable effects to my eye. So pretty happy on that front. The action scenes, as far as like how they were choreographed, the fighting and stuff, I mean, it was fine, but it wasn't as interesting as many other movies that have, fighting as a main component. It certainly wasn't stylized in its presentation in a way that I would have preferred. And there were a few missed opportunities to really have bionics just demolish people. They established that these limbs are pretty strong. And so when they would make contact with somebody, and I'm like, well, this character is meant to be unsympathetic. They're clearly like a thug or a gang member, whatever, and they're clearly a bad person. We should be okay, dramatically speaking, when we're talking about fiction, with them dying. In another movie, I think they would have just obliterated them. It would have been a gooey paste left behind. But and it's not that I would need that, but that certainly conveys very strikingly just the power of a character when you have those kinds of moments in this kind of fiction. But they really were shying away from that, despite the fact that, like, you would see a grunt on the actress's face when she's like, "Arr!" I'm like, if she's putting in that much effort, she grunted less when she did this other thing with the bionic limb that was a lot more strength, intensive. And so I don't understand the grunting here, and we're not seeing him turn into goo. But maybe they were just wanting to avoid overly brutal or gory effects. But all in all, though, given that it's actually not a sci-fi action movie, that would be too simplistic of a genre description. I think it's a sci-fi action drama. And so given that it is kind of like standing on different types of legs to prop the whole experience up, not just leaning on the action, I'm pretty satisfied with how the quality of the action. Okay, themes. Is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance in the themes of this thing that could trigger some worthwhile thoughts or conversation? Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. The sibling rivalry, the competition between adult siblings specifically, the idea of children being favored by the parent, or at least that being the perception of the siblings that do not feel favored. Most of it is about these two sisters and their rivalry, but they share a brother, and he gets into the mix too. There's struggles and these feelings of rivalry and resentment and being left out, that all of them are feeling, and their adult father is in the mix too, and I guess adult father, I guess by definition, you'd pretty much be an adult, right? Anyway, but he's in the mix too. And so it's really the central theme as well as the central dramatic premise. And so I think that it could certainly lead to some thought, especially if you can relate to the idea of feeling overlooked among your siblings or feeling envious of a sibling's accomplishments. But I think the message in this movie, when all is said and done, is a good one. I think what they would say is a value here is that achieving favorable comparison to your siblings or achieving a certain amount of success is not worth the damage to those relationships. That all those things that you're pursuing and that you're jealous of, those it suddenly become glaringly obvious at some point are worthless compared to the relationship that you have with your siblings. And so I appreciated them kind of getting to that message at some point. All right, I have no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, it's nothing to get Netflix for a month. And it's not super memorable, but the next time you have Netflix and you want a sci-fi story about family that gives you a break from the Hollywood committee-produced scripts, this is worth kicking back and watching. It's rated TVMA for language, smoking, violence, and I would add a sexual scene without nudity in it. That wasn't in the description, but there definitely is a sexual scene in it. And those would be all my thoughts for now on Bionic. Right now, I'd like to take some time to write a tune for pre-made rhyme. The lyrics kind of never change, but the melody gets rearranged. I never know what I'll create to say how much I appreciate Dan Excel, Gabriel Stinson, Olin D. Branham, Winston Crutchfield, Lee Bray, Justin D. Myers, Joel Nelson, and Scruffosaurus. Thank you for supporting me and SBP and CGC. And now to all who hear this tune, thank you as well. Please come back soon. Want to hear your name in song? Then check out our page on Patreon. All right, I would love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click the bell, do the things. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making this review possible. You can get info about the benefits of joining over at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Then I hope you will check out our podcast and stay connected to all CGC content over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.